Good evening and welcome to the City of Topeka Planning Commission meeting. We are a commission appointed by the mayor and city council to plan for the orderly growth and development of the community, to hold public hearings, and to make recommendations to the governing body on planning items. Please note that the governing body rules state that the public hearings for planning cases shall be conducted solely by the Planning Commission. No additional public hearings will be conducted by the governing body. At the end of regular business, the commission will entertain general public comment regarding matters that are related to commission business, provided that the person has signed up on Topeka Speaks or has notified staff prior to 5 p.m. today. Comments are limited to 4 minutes. Amanda, can you please take the roll?
Mr. Lally.
Here.
Ms. Herron.
Here.
Mr. Brooks.
Here.
Mr. Nager.
Here.
Ms. Pearson.
Here.
Mr. Mock.
Here.
Ms. Hannon.
Here.
We have enough for a quorum.
Then we will move on to, I believe, our only action item tonight is regarding duplexes in single-family housing. Oh, the end already?
Mr. Chairman, you still have minutes and declaration of.
Sorry, all right. I'm working off of no physical copy this time, so thank you. Then, sorry, we will approve the minutes for the October meeting first.
I make a motion to approve minutes.
All right.
Second.
Any discussion on that one? Go ahead.
Ms. Hannon.
Aye.
Mr. Mock.
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
Mr. Nager.
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Ms. Herron.
Aye.
Mr. Lally.
Aye.
Minutes pass.
Then we move on to conflict of interest or ex parte communications. Is that the case, or since we have no?
I'd still ask for it.
All right. Then any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest that anyone needs to speak to?
I've just had various conversations regarding the zoning issue.
Okay.
That's it.
Anything else? All right. Now we move on to action items. And the only action item that I have tonight is a potential text amendment regarding duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes in single-family zoned lots.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. You'll be happy to know we've had a lot of meetings on this subject. I presented a lot of slides, so I'm not going to present a really long slideshow tonight. I think you'll be happy to hear that. But if you have any questions, certainly we can access some of that information if necessary. So just to recap what happened at the October 20 meeting, staff showed you examples of duplexes, quadplexes, attached single family, kind of to get an idea of what some of the issues are when someone tries to develop one of those things. You know, I have to meet parking standards, setbacks, they need to meet building code. Commissioner Mock read a statement regarding this, and a lot of Commissioner Mock's comments were opposed to some of the recommendations that are being made by the committee and staff. And in the end, the Planning Commission deferred further discussion to this meeting, potentially for action in this meeting. So just to recap, current zoning regulations, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes are prohibited in R1 and R2 districts. Those are the single-family residential districts. So if someone has a property and they want to develop something like that, they would have to rezone the property to do that. The recommendation from the Housing Committee is to allow duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes by conditional use permit. The recommendation by staff is a little different than that. It's to allow duplexes and triplexes by conditional use permit, subject to new CUP guidelines. So these guidelines that are proposed by staff, they're attached to your staff report in the packet. There are existing conditional use permit guidelines that address density, height, floor area, et cetera. But these additional guidelines that are recommended by staff would be specific to this situation. The first one is that in there is to propose to not have them highly concentrated within a residential subdivision or on the same block in a subdivision or neighborhood. To comply with design guidelines of the neighborhood plan where applicable. And there's a guideline in there about paving of front yards to accommodate required parking, that should be minimized or mitigated. So those are some of the potential negative impacts of duplexes and triplexes. So again, there are several options here before you. This table over here kind of narrows it down a little bit. You could do some variation on this table. So nothing in this table includes by right as an option. All of this would require a conditional use permit. The one that is recommended by the Housing Committee is option B1. That's the one that's highlighted. It's the committee's recommendation. Planning staff's recommendation is more like B7, except it would be limited to duplexes and triplexes. So just in the memo that's in the packet, staff responds to some of Commissioner Mock's recommendations in his statement. And by the way, his statement is attached to the packet. There are two documents from Commissioner Mock. The second one is kind of a clarification and goes into more detail. We didn't really try to address what's in that document so much. It was more of the comments made at the meeting. So one of the comments was that the text amendment should apply only within designated opportunity and transitional neighborhoods. So one thing to keep in mind that if a conditional use permit is required, that means a project is going to go through a process. It's not automatically going to be approved in any neighborhood. It's going to go through a process. And that process is not easy. It's very similar to a rezoning. The other thing is if you were trying to limit it to one neighborhood, really the only way to do that is through overlay zoning. So one of the issues is how do you select a neighborhood? Second issue is how do you write the overlay district? And keep in mind that this would be an overlay district for a very narrow purpose. If you were going to allow it in some neighborhoods, it would be specifically to only allow duplexes and triplexes and quadplexes. It'd be for a very narrow purpose. And that's usually not how overlay districts work in the city of Topeka. It doesn't mean they can't legally work that way or theoretically work that way, but that's a lot to do just to create an overlay district. The other point I want to make is the purpose of the proposed text amendments really is to increase the supply and variety of housing. Neighborhood revitalization, that's a welcome byproduct of potentially this text change, but that's not really the objective of what's being proposed. And we do have other measures used to revitalize areas that are blighted, one being the neighborhood revitalization program. Another comment made was that missing middle housing threatens property values in stable neighborhoods. There's really no evidence of that. There's actually some literature, and there's some in your packet where there's been some research done that shows that there isn't a negative impact by the introduction of multifamily residential development. Okay. Keep in mind also that the shortage of missing middle housing, affordable housing, and workforce housing is well documented in citywide housing study and strategy. The citywide housing study and strategy. It's also a nationally recognized problem. I went to a housing conference recently, and it's a recognized problem. It's in the literature. It's a recognized problem nationally, and it affects Topeka as well. And to say this is a solution in search of a problem really is not accurate. It's a problem. Okay, so one of the comments was to free up land outside the city limits in what we call the extraterritorial jurisdiction. For those who don't know, the extraterritorial jurisdiction is an area outside city limits, but generally speaking, it's within 3 miles of the city limits. The city has subdivision authority, and when we review the subdivision of land, we need to comply with our subdivision code, and sometimes it requires a subdivision plat. And in order for the city to approve a subdivision plat, we have to find that it is consistent with the land use and growth management plan. And the land use and growth management plan does not encourage a lot of residential development outside the city limits. It accommodates limited residential development, and there's a good reason for that. And that's explained in the land use and growth management plan. One thing, if you haven't done this already, there's a 8-minute video on the city's website. I think it's still there. We just updated our website, but that explains the land use and growth management plan. It's a pretty compelling video. One thing I should say also is we have a lot of vacant lots at the edge of the city that have been platted. We have land hasn't been platted, but it could be developed not only within the city limits, but at the edge of the city within the urban growth area. And the other point I want to make is that the comment was made that this will stimulate development of those more expensive homes. There's really no incentive needed to stimulate the building of more expensive homes. That's not a problem. That's what builders are building because that's what they can make a profit at. So there are a lot of comments about using the land bank and the recommendation that the Planning Commission take a more active role in the land bank and use the land bank more aggressively. So the land bank, I won't go into a lot of detail here, but the land bank is fairly recent. Within the past 2 years, it was developed. There were a handful of lots. I don't know how many lots the city owns right now, 10 maybe, 12. The land bank is managed by the Planning and Development Department, by the Planning and Development Director, and there's a board that oversees the land bank, but the Planning Commission does not have a role in the land bank. It's not set up that way. And I would say in the future, it might be interesting, if you're interested, for staff to make a presentation on the land bank. We are not directly involved in the land bank. That's the Planning and Development Director, and also there's a staff person who's the lead on the land bank. So we can do that if you'd like. So just want to go over these options again. So the recommendation of the Housing Committee is to allow duplexes, triplexes, quadplexes by conditional use permit. It's represented in cell B1 on this table. Staff's recommending that option B7, but limited to duplexes and triplexes and not quadplexes, and with conditional use permit guidelines. And that concludes my presentation, and be happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions for staff?
As a part of the conditional use permit process, does it ever come back to us?
It does. So the conditional use permit process is almost identical to rezoning. So requires a neighborhood information meeting, requires a public hearing, it's advertised. The Planning Commission holds a public hearing and makes a recommendation to the governing body. And just like rezoning, it requires notification of neighbors within a certain radius. For the neighborhood information meeting, it's 300 feet for smaller sites. And for what's required by law is, for the public hearing, it's a 200-foot radius. And the decision is ultimately made by the governing body.
Any other questions for staff? Then any general discussion?
I just had a quick question of the options presented. Has the committee discussed B7?
Since it being last presented, no, but we were presented with the same rubric when we were selecting our various options, which the committee voted on B1 being our selection, but there wasn't any continuing communication after that.
Thank you.
Is it too late to ask some questions?
Go ahead.
I guess, but aren't you guys part of the planning and development?
We are, but the planning commission at this time does not have a role.
Sure, the commission here doesn't, but
There's
do
a-
we not give you, what was the opening statement where we give directions or suggestions for you guys to go and,
Make recommendations to
There
the
you go.
governing body on planning items?
could we not make recommendations for you guys to look at that? Because under the policy for the planning department, the planning and development department is in charge of the administration and governance, transaction and the acquisitions that take part in the land bank.
Yeah, the department is. So the department,
Mike, can I answer this
yeah,
question?
go ahead. That's a Dan question.
So Commissioner Mock, I do think it would be helpful to have a presentation on the land bank so we could all understand what's actually happening with it. I will note that, again, I think I mentioned this last month, that the governing body authorized the land bank. They are the ones that created it and have charged that board that gets appointed with making decisions about acquiring land, disposing of land, et cetera. The planning and development director is a member of the board, just like currently Spencer Duncan, Councilman Duncan is on the board, and some other folks. The board is what is charged with disposing, again, charging of acquiring properties, disposing of properties. So, and primarily because the planning and development director is a voting member. From that perspective, we have a staff that's under the planning and development director. It's management analyst, thank you, that is under that position that is helping to manage that program as far as, getting agendas ready and those sorts of things and helping with mapping and whatnot. So, again, I think if we can have the land bank come and talk to you and you suggest some things and see how that goes, that's probably a good place to start with the land bank, I would say.
Sure. I was just using what was on the city's website and the policies that the land bank had put up on there to use to craft my response there.
Gotcha. I think having a presentation on land bank would be great.
The other question I had regarding as far as the price of the homes in stable neighborhoods, that study that was used said that there wasn't really that much of effect. Wasn't that, if I remember right, wasn't that based on the environment that it was based on had to do with surrounding community that was surrounded by industrial or commercial properties? It was based on the surrounding environment was different than just being in the middle of a neighborhood. If you went back to that original study that it was quoted.
That's not my understanding. So,
I'm sorry, that was a large packet. I
Yeah.
totally missed your memo, otherwise I'd brought
yeah, there are two
my
attachments.
research.
They were attached to the Housing Committee's memo, literature that the Housing
Yes.
Committee submitted to us, to the Planning Commission. They were in the last meeting. And that's not my impression, is that they were industrial communities. They were-
It might not have been industrial, but I
Yeah.
know it just wasn't in the middle of a.
That's not my
established
impression.
neighborhoods.
I'd have to go back and read it.
I have
Sure.
a bit of some information. I believe that there were 4 different studies cited. One was about a suburban environment in which townhomes and mixed use, so like businesses on the first floor, apartments on the top. And that was a situation in which single-family zoning within a mile seemed to increase in property value. And then beyond a mile, kind of somewhere between increase and hold steady. There was a second one that was about multifamily dwellings. And that was one in which they said within 300 feet of the development, that there wasn't any negative impact on property values noticed. And that, I think that was the one where about half of them, they actually saw increased property values. A third one where it was single-family houses with different mixed-use development. So again, the kind of like business apartment situation. And those, they saw that the single-family housing near those developments, the property value increased faster than single-family houses that were not near those sorts of developments. And then the last one was kind of a like, I got the idea that they were kind of trying to go to the extreme to see like what if about an extremely more dense development in which it's more apartment buildings, so not really what we're talking about here, but they saw that they did not notice any particular correlation or causation between those developments and single-family property values.
Just within a small radius from where they're at.
So some of them did within like 300 feet, others did within like a mile.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah.
No, I just don't, I don't want to cut you off if you have more questions. All right. Any more questions or discussion? All right. Then, since it's an action item, we do need some motion of some kind. That can be deferring, it can be sending back to the committee, accepting, rejecting, amending, but I would be open for motions. Commissioner Brooks?
So I am on the housing committee, and this is good. This is a helpful way to go through this. We're hearing different opinions and thinking through it more. Yeah, we had a unanimous approval to go with option B1. I'm more in favor of the B7. I think I think this is the right move. I think that we got to do things that help housing in Topeka. And my goal is to try to think through any unintended consequences, and that, we don't want that. And so, to me, B7 gives, we have the CUP already. There's a lot of risk management in that, just in itself. But adding design standards and density standards, I think, adds a little bit more protection from those potential unintended consequences that, things that we're not thinking of, things that we haven't heard or whatever. And so I'm going to move to approve the option B7.
Commissioner, for clarity,
Yeah.
can you state which, like, duplex, what are the things? Just so.
Someone needs to write it down for me. Someone else can move to approve it. Okay. Yeah, so, I just need the right wording. So, move to approve option B7 CUP guidelines to address issues of concentration, design, and parking as it relates to duplexes and triplexes.
But not quadplexes.
And quadplexes.
Oh.
And R1 zone districts.
As long as I'm clear. For my sake, I want to make sure I'm remembering correctly the CUP guidelines. I've got something from the September meeting here that has a few different things, or is it this that's on the screen now?
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah, it should be exactly what's in the packet, but that's it. But it is in the packet as well.
All right. Any discussion, questions?
I do not have a problem with B7.
All right.
Is that a second?
Oh, yeah,
I'm just saying, it's part of the discussion.
yes.
So I don't think we have a second
Yeah,
yet.
well, yeah, that is fair.
I actually have a question. So when it comes to determining the design and guidelines within the CUP, someone that wants to create this type of housing comes to planning staff, and then planning staff would provide the recommendations on, like, design standards, and then after they complete their packet, then it would come to planning staff or the planning commission?
The way it'll happen is, what typically happens is we get contacted by someone who's interested in doing a development. And they will, and this has happened at least a few times. Hey, there's this vacant lot, I would like to build a duplex on this vacant lot. And in some cases, we've said, well, that requires rezoning. If this was adopted, then we would say that requires a conditional use permit. The process is this: we have that initial contact, we always have a pre-application meeting where we invite other city staff to address any particular issues about that project and that site. And somewhere in that, within those two meetings, and quite often there are more than two meetings, because there are a lot of follow-up questions. The point is, there's a lot of pre-application discussion, and planning staff will say, well, this is the process, and the process is submit an application, pay the fee up front, schedule a neighborhood information meeting, conduct a neighborhood information meeting, staff makes a recommendation after evaluating the project in light of any guidelines that apply and the golden factors. We publish a notice of the public hearing, and the notice is sent to everyone within 200 feet of this property. And then the planning commission holds their hearing and makes a recommendation. So what we do is we go over what guidelines or standards that would apply. So we would share this with those people. And then as we evaluate it, we would evaluate it in light of these guidelines. Does that answer your question, Commissioner?
Yeah, it does. And I'm okay with it. I will just voice one of my concerns with this is that most likely the typical person that's going to create this type of housing is not going to be a major organization. I think sometimes I've seen things come through the planning commission where maybe some of the requirements might be a little bit, I'm trying to find the word, more substantial than maybe what's needed. And so my biggest concern is that we will end up pushing away more housing creation because we're going to start putting requirements on top of requirements to where we're not really even seeing housing that's needed come to fruition. So I think that could be an unintended consequence. However, if this is what the planning commission wants to go forward with, I'm okay with it. I just wanted to kind of put that for the record and just something to think about when it comes to design guidelines and standards. That's just something that's thought through as we move forward, so.
So I believe that we still technically do not have a second.
I will second.
All right. So now we officially have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? For me, I'm gonna vote for this. One of the compelling reasons I think is that in some ways, not always, but in some ways we are accountable to the city council, and indisputably the city council's accountable to the people of Topeka. They will get a final say in this regardless of what we say, but they have statements and interviews and public announcements at the end of council meetings are one thing, but times whenever they take a vote, I think are times whenever we should really be sure to pay attention to what they're saying. And they approved the land use and growth management plan. That said a number of things, including there should be a range of housing types built through the community, and that compact growth is an overarching pillar of the plan. It said that compact development is more efficient than low-density sprawl. Mixing uses like residential, commercial, services, and amenities is efficient. That growth in the city should ideally be where infrastructure is already built. That ranges of housing options should be offered. That a variety of housing types should be included. Developing at higher residential densities and mixing uses rather than only developing single-family neighborhoods should be ideal. The city council also voted to adopt the housing study. The housing study says that we should look at duplexes. It says that Topeka has a relatively limited options to meet the demand of growing number of affluent renter households. And while I get the idea of some sort of overlay district, I'm a little confused because the overlay district as proposed would still have a CUP. So to me, that kind of allows a case-by-case analysis and thinking about different pros and cons specific to that nature in the place where there's an overlay district, which I think it's not crazy to think that some of those places it will be welcome, some of those places it won't be welcome. I think that's also true of places that wouldn't be under an overlay district. And so the CUP, which has the neighborhood information meeting, has public notice, a public meeting, a decision by the planning commission, a decision by the city council, where we take into consideration the golden factors. I think that's a more effective way to kind of consider local pros and cons. I also think it's more in line with what we heard from the survey than either a by right or a neighborhood by neighborhood approach. So those are some of my thoughts. Anything else?
Well said.
Go ahead.
Mr. Lawley.
Aye.
Ms. Herron.
Aye.
Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Mr. Nager.
Aye.
Ms. Pearson.
Aye.
Mr. Mock.
Nay.
Ms. Hannon.
Aye.
Motion passes.
I maybe should have asked this before, but one logistical question. Will this be going in front of the governing body and the Policy and Finance Committee, or?
So we're due to provide an update to the Policy and Finance Committee. It's just strictly an update. That will likely be in December. I guess I'm not positive about that. We don't control that agenda. And then once we do that, it would go to the governing body more than likely the next month for action. So it could be December, January, maybe it's January, February. It just kind of depends on how we can get on agendas.
But we wouldn't anticipate that the committee has any formal action. It's an informational session rather than, okay, all right. Then next on our agenda is our non-action item, or our discussion item, which is the Southeast Topeka Development Plan. I'll turn it over to staff.
Commissioners, I will handle this this item for discussion. I want to mention that this is fairly unique in what we've done for planning, specifically what we would call area planning, area-wide planning in Topeka. Most of you know we've got a pretty robust neighborhood planning process, and we bring you neighborhood plans every so often. So we do that kind of on a more macro level for neighborhoods, or micro level for neighborhoods. But we haven't done a plan for a new growth area, which is what this is. This is an area that we would expect to grow into in the future. So this plan is trying to set the table, trying to understand the issues, provide some options, and so forth and so on. So let me get into this a little bit. So little background. So Development Strategies was hired by the city to put together this land use plan. It's more than a land use plan. I'll get into that. So the purpose, again, is to develop a plan for the future growth of the area. This is around the intersection of 45th and Croco. That image there you can see, it's primarily the kind of the northeast quadrant there of 45th and Croco. It's pretty much a section, section there. So the consultant met with property owners. The good thing about this area is it hasn't been chopped up for these rural residential lots. So we've got some fairly large acreages out here that are, at least at this point, still available for development. They also met with stakeholders and also key city stakeholders. And what I mean by that is the utility folks, the street folks, to kind of understand those particular issues with growth in this area, urban growth in this area. Other stakeholders that were talked to would be the school district, the Shawnee County Planning Office, and also a few developers. So we talked to developers that have worked in this area previously, and then developers that have not been in this area, that have worked in other parts of town. The consultant ultimately put together a SWOT analysis, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats analysis, and some of the items are noted there. So let's move on. So I'm not going to read all of this. It's really the bolded words here. So the plan is focusing on land uses, circulation, open spaces. It includes some key implementation actions. The plan provides development programs, evaluates infrastructure issues. It includes a fiscal impact projections, which are fairly informative. And the plan is based on economic and market realities. The real great thing about having development strategies work on this plan is that they bring that element of their analysis, that market-based, that economic analysis to this plan in addition to their land use. So we're really getting a really full service, full feature plan here. So let's talk about the economic and market realities then. So as they looked at this area, but also the Topeka market overall, the demand for office is limited in this area, and it's limited throughout the city. You really have a slowed office market just overall. Retail has the potential to be positive in this area, but you really need the residential growth. You really need the rooftops to drive some of the retail that could locate in this area. Hospitality was looked at as a possibility. So we're so close to Lake Shawnee out there. There's a potential opportunity there, but more than likely a limited opportunity. And then the two strong markets are the multifamily. There isn't a lot out in that area to begin with, and we're next to Shawnee County and all that's going on there, or the Lake Shawnee, sorry, and all that's going on there. And then the for sale single-family market is strong as well, which is the typical development pattern for some of that growth that's already out there. So the plan provides some land use options. So I think the point to make here is, if this plan gets adopted as a comprehensive plan amendment, it becomes the policy document for this area, for the city, for developers, property owners, et cetera. And these options are provided to sort of stimulate ideas and to be creative about how this area could develop. Doesn't mean it has to happen this way. That's why there are options. We're, again, trying to set the table. So, but it does evaluate these options, and we'll get into that also. So 1 and 1B are showed here. These are what they've termed the conservative planning scenario. So this is business as usual, the typical development pattern on the edge of Topeka that goes on. So, you know, a lot of kind of low-density residential development, focusing the multifamily along the intersection of 45th and Croco, so the northwest and northeast corners haven't yet developed for commercial, so that's where you would focus that. And this is more of a kind of a phase one, so you don't really develop the whole area necessarily, just, you know, that we would accommodate it where it is shown. 1B is kind of full build out. So again, the full build out, you can see the typical, this is the conservative development option, the typical pattern for sort of suburban growth in Topeka is low density residential. So that's kind of what's built out on that option. So the next two options, and unfortunately I didn't notice this until this afternoon, the image on the right is not 2B, it's still 2A. So when we update this presentation, the next time we come back, it'll have both options in here. But these are the traditional, this is the traditional neighborhood design option. So what does that mean? I mean, overall it means higher densities. You're building to a higher density. You know, you would tighter setbacks. It's kind of more about the structure and less about the use. It ups the density overall. And it includes, so the kind of the darker yellow would be, you know, a higher density than what is shown on the conservative, for instance. So you've got, you know, that kind of light yellow is standard suburban development, and the darker yellows are more density, more, you know, more overall density in that area. And then similar to the conservative, 2B would show the whole area built out, which I don't have on the screen. So the next couple slides are the fiscal impact information. The full build out, you can kind of see here. So let's just talk. So if you look at 1A, it's got a total market value, for instance, of $452 million. You go all the way to the other end of the spectrum on that kind of that first line there that's got the numbers, and it's, you know, 1.1 billion. Is that right? 1.1 billion for full build out of traditional neighborhood design. So what it's trying to talk about here is how you develop will impact the fiscal impacts back to the city, basically. So having higher density obviously means more units, more people paying property taxes, et cetera, et cetera. More people using the water line, the sewer lines that are out there, making that cheaper overall. So you can kind of see the numbers. They all get a little better depending on the density. One thing to note, if you find this slide or this page in the document, there is a sidebar there that's got a lot of information that kind of explains this. But it's kind of the same thing as the last slide. It's just kind of showing it differently. It's talking about indexed revenue to cost ratio. Basically, the only one that is above zero is the full design for the traditional neighborhood build out. That's the one that has a positive revenue to cost ratio. But I would encourage you to read that document, that page in particular, to see what it says. Then some implementation actions. So the plan evaluates existing sewer, water, and street infrastructure in the area. So I mentioned this, the consultant met with city staff, city utility staff, and city's public works, and evaluated, you know, how, for instance, if you dig into it and go to the appendix, you can see the different options for getting the sewer across Croco to the east. directly north of Rockfire. Somebody's going to have to get sewer across to the east across Croco to serve that area. So that's one of the big things that the plan talks about and talks about options. There's also recommendations for growth management and annexation, and then talks about jurisdictional partnerships as well. So just process, again, so maybe I didn't explain this exactly the best way. So what we're doing with this plan is following a similar process that we do with neighborhood plans, where we bring it to you for a discussion, and then if everybody's cool with coming back with an action item, then we would do that. And it's a comprehensive plan amendment. So that means you would be making a recommendation to amend this document into our comprehensive plan. And just like we do with neighborhood plans, they become elements of the comprehensive plan. They're in the comp plan, but they're their own separate document. And then we use that as a policy guide for future decisions, which could be development-related decisions. Maybe there's recommendations on possibly changing our development code to be more supportive of traditional neighborhood design. And that's what the document would be for. And you make a recommendation to the governing body, who would ultimately decide to approve it or not. So ideally, we would come back in December with an action item. With that, I'll be happy to try to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff?
A couple of questions.
Yeah.
So has there been any discussions with the current landowners of this area?
Yeah, the very first thing the consultant did was talk to as many property owners as they could and try to get some thoughts about the future, where they were at, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And then, could you, and maybe you said this and I missed it, just kind of talk through why this site, why not other areas? Just help me understand that a little bit.
Sure. So the reason why this site, it was governing body council action to authorize the project in that specific area. So that was the genesis of the project. I will say, and I think I, in passing, kind of brought this up already, but this area is good to do this because it hasn't been, so Shawnee County has their platting exemption rules are, meaning you don't have to plat to get to divide your property if you have 3 acres and 200 feet of frontage. So you'll see that pattern in a lot of places around, and it becomes a piano key down the main road there, and that really impacts the ability of a city to grow into that area in the future, because it won't be anything else. It absolutely will not. It'll just be that. It'll be piano key 3-acre lots. And so this area hasn't gone through that. A portion of it is in the urban growth area, and so it's big pieces of ground that are still available for big subdivisions or whatever might come along in the future. So that makes it, so if you look at the map, we didn't really go south of there, south of 45th.
Because of the piano keys.
Right. So this is the area that's still available currently for development.
Okay.
So just to be clear, this does not, it would be adopted into the plan or the general plan. It does not mean that there's like any private entity that's like requesting for one of these to immediately occur.
No, we're not at that stage. It's, I probably keep repeating this, it's setting the table, basically. It's saying, here's why it makes sense to do certain things here, here's what it takes to get the sewer, it's got a lot of information for somebody that wants to know how to develop over there.
I did like having, I'm sure it takes more time and effort and probably therefore also expenses to have 4 different options. But it is nice, and it is nice to have that flexibility so that if some potential builder comes in and wants something in between them, that they know that, yeah, something in between these 4 is good. I also really, really appreciated the page that showed the cost ratio. I think that that's something that not everyone's tracking, that sometimes the developments on the side of the state can actually kind of put our city's budget in more of a tough spot than improve it. I think it was Memphis a couple years ago that actually annexed a huge amount of land, and then after a few years decided that no, that was ruining their budget, and massive amounts of land that were part of the city of Memphis and then were put back to the county and stuff. So it really can impact the bottom line. Any other discussion? Then no motion needed on that one. We'll hear
Come back
next
in
month
December.
and have a
Yep.
motion then. I believe our next agenda item is our report from the Standing Committee on Housing. So I'll invite Jim up to do that.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, first of all, on behalf of the Housing Committee, I want to thank you for taking action tonight, sending something on to the governing body. I don't think we can overstate how important it is for the elected officials in this city to address the housing issue in the context of the zoning regulations. So, thank you. Housing Committee met last on October 1, and we met with the Executive Committee and staff from the Sunflower Association of Realtors. Excuse my voice here. The association had asked for a meeting with the Housing Committee, and we were very pleased to accommodate them for that. It was a cordial and constructive meeting. We talked about how the committee has worked to try to make amendments to the city's development code in order to encourage housing construction. And we discussed the missing middle proposal that has been in front of you all for a number of months. Discussed how the missing middle proposal from the Housing Committee aligned with the goals and objectives of the 2020 housing study. And staff gave the slideshow to the association members at that meeting as well. And all in all, I think we were able to help dispel much of the misinformation that had been spread about the missing middle proposal. We also discussed ways for the association to have an ongoing relationship with the Housing Committee and with the Planning Commission and/or the Planning Commission in order to work towards the common goal of improving Topeka's housing stock. Mr. Chairman, the next meeting of the Housing Committee will be a week from today at noon over at the Holiday Building on the second floor conference room. And the reason I mention all that detail is that we're going to be meeting with the executive director of the Kansas Housing Resource Corporation. That's Ryan Vincent. And he's going to talk about the workings of the KHRC, the various housing programs that KHRC administers, and ways in which we can improve or increase the working relationship between the city and KHRC. I think we're also going to expect to hear, I'm going to expect to hear anyway, Mr. Vincent's thoughts on how recent federal and state funding cuts and housing program cuts, including the loss or the decrease of the low-income housing tax credit at both the federal and state level, are going to adversely affect the construction of housing in general and probably put any large multifamily affordable housing projects at risk for the foreseeable future. So anyway, you're all invited to attend that meeting if you want to hear directly from the executive director of the KHRC. We're very, very pleased to have him agree to meet with us. So that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Great. All right. Then moving on, will be communications to the commission.
Commissioners, no real communications other than you will have a meeting in December. There's at least one action item. One zoning case. We potentially will bring some text amendments to you for discussion. It's just, potentially some more housing-related stuff, but also probably some cleanup items as well. But yeah, so you'll be meeting in December.
Anyone for public comment sign up? No. All right. Then I believe that is everything on our agenda, and so tonight's meeting is adjourned.